Good evening, everyone. Russ sent me an email after a week of being in his PhD program. A student at McMaster called him Dr. Ford. He said he didn't correct her. So he's having a good time. Good evening, and thank you very much for coming out tonight to mark 40 years of service from LAMP in the South Etobicoke community. My name is Kedona, and as Jeffrey mentioned, I have been with LAMP for just over 11 years. And I am the interim executive director for the next 6 months, or whatever's left of 6 months. I'm really pleased to be here tonight with you, and even happier to be a member of the LAMP team to mark this special occasion. LAMP has been, every time I come to work, every year that passes, I am more grateful than the last to be a member of the LAMP team, and because I get to mirror that same passion that I have for community work in my professional life as I do in my personal life. So I'm so grateful for that. It was over 25 years ago that I moved to Canada from Jamaica, and it was this whole new world of unknowns. It was extremely scary, but exciting all the same. There were tough times, but every challenge was a worthwhile experience. I've had the pleasure of knowing what it's like to live in and experience the struggles of marginalized communities that have little or no resources to support the development of young people and young families. My parents still tell the story, just like I'm sure some of your parents still do. They tell the stories of, how difficult things were at times, and there were so many opportunities that I wanted to take advantage of, but they said no because they couldn't afford to say yes. I describe all of these experiences as a pleasure because they shaped me. They made me resilient, determined, and allowed me to find my voice. They gave me purpose. These experiences are the basis of my commitment to community, dedication to supporting the development and sustainability of healthy communities, and social justice. They're really the reason why I joined LAMP and why I'm still here after 11 years, because this agency really lives that every day. The membership and community of LAMP has a lot to be proud of today. This organization is a leader among community health centers, and I'm especially proud that the wide variety of primary health care and community health services and programs we offer continue to reflect LAMP's commitment to the health center model of taking care of the whole person. This year, LAMP is celebrating 40 years of being around, celebrating 40 years wise, and 40 years strong because of the continued commitment of the staff, clients, and the entire community. I recall at a meeting doing an exercise where we were asked by the facilitator to choose an animal that we thought best represented LAMP. So some people chose, the majestic lion that symbolized pride and family and community. Some chose a clever fox. Some chose a powerful bear. There was one person, who shall remain nameless, who, when asked what the animal that he chose that best described LAMP was, he said, a cockroach. Now, everybody, of course, was taken aback. What do you mean we're ready to defend LAMP? What do you mean a cockroach? But in asking the question, why is that the animal you chose? The rationale was, through all the great periods and the difficult times, through political and social changes, sector changes, and through 40 years of successes and challenges, LAMP has always remained resilient and strong. It has not just survived this landscape of constant change. LAMP has skillfully navigated these changes, all the while working with our community to provide great service and support and championing social justice causes that impact our community. LAMP is not a physical building. LAMP is the majestic lion and bear, the clever fox, and the resilient cockroach that are all embodied in the amazing people in this room and out there in the community, who are all our unrelenting partners in support of building a healthy community. Thank you for your commitment, and I know that we will take with us the wisdom and strength of the last 40 years as we embark on another 40 years. As we look around our immediate community and around the world, it's glaringly obvious that there is so much more work to be done to maintain the gains we've made so far. There's also an urgent need for us to pay attention to the current and emerging issues of community health, social justice, and equity that threaten to divide the community and leave some of our community members behind. But as I look around the room and see children, youth, adults, and seniors, I know that LAM has a bright future of strength, wisdom, innovation, ingenuity, and resilience that is inspiring. If you'll notice, our logo is a torch. Your presence, commitment, and engagement are the fuel that keeps this torch glowing, and it is what will keep it burning bright for another 40 years. On October 21st, right here in this building, there will be a dinner and dance in celebration of LAM's 40th anniversary. Promotion for this event has been going on for some time, and I'm sure many of you know about it. Now, if you do need information, there's a table at the back, but an already amazing night is only going to be that much better with all of you there. So please do consider joining us for that celebration, because you all have very, very much to be proud of. Congratulations on 40 years, and I'm so happy to be here with you to celebrate that.
Are currently on the wait list for subsidized housing in Toronto, and some people say that that's about 10 years. That's over 90,000 households and 181,000 people who are not able to afford a home. $706, that's the amount that the Ontario Works total monthly allowance for a single adult gets. That means their rent, their food, their transportation, holidays. It's really hard. Okay. We were listening to CBC Radio the other day, and on the news it said $1,700 is the average private market rent for a one-bedroom Toronto apartment, and that's just currently. So some are a little lower, some are a little higher, but that's kind of an astounding figure. Okay. There are an estimated 5,253 people sleeping outside or in shelters in Toronto each night. 65% of those people are men. 33% are Indigenous. And 21% are from the LGBTQ+ community. The vacancy rate for rental apartments in Toronto is just 1.3%. And in Etobicoke South, it's even lower, 0.8%. And John will tell you a little bit later, a little more about how it's even less than that. Recent census data shows us that 2 in 5 young adults between the age of 20 and 34 are still living at home in Ontario. 42% of young adults between 20 and 29 in Canada still live with one parent. And this just came out about a week ago. Daily Bread released some really good... Is there somebody from Daily Bread here today? Great. They just released a fabulous report on who's hungry. It's a little astounding, the figures. At Daily Bread member agencies, seniors 65 and over accessing food banks have increased by nearly 27% in 1 year. And it is going up dramatically. 27% in 1 year. Compared with other age groups, but they've also increased as well, between 14 and 18%. And that's in that new report Daily Bread put out, Who's Hungry? You're welcome to read it. But it just shows what's happening in our community today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for attending and allowing me to share my experiences with you. I have to say that I've faced a lot of challenges throughout my life. And I feel that I'm a woman of great resilience because of it. It helps me in the work I do. I love the work I do. And it influences that work. So yes, I did flee an abusive relationship in 2005 after 9 years. I was living a comfortable life. I was working at Liberty Health. It's now taken over by Maritime Life. But I was making $50,000 a year. I had a nice apartment. I had a car, and things were going well. And it wasn't, I hate to question why doesn't she leave. There's so many reasons why she doesn't leave. But it took my children for me to see that. I didn't want my children to be going through that, and that's when I decided to leave. And, but leaving places a woman, I'm a single mom in poverty. I had to experience many systems like evictions, shelter systems, Children's Aid Society, family court, the welfare system, the mental health system, and addiction system. And so, and during that time, I did use LAMP services, so they were very, very helpful. They had a rent bank for back then, and that was very, very helpful, and other services. But throughout this, there were struggles, and the biggest struggle was housing, but not as it is now. When my children were in Children's Aid Society, I was on Ontario Works, and they were ready to return my children back, but I had only enough money, you saw how much that was, and to rent a room. And so I had to get rooms for my children to return. Ontario Works wouldn't give me the money to get my children back, and my children couldn't come back until I got the rooms. It was a catch-22 that finally, actually this April, that something Ontario Works has changed. So through advocacy, so I'm very, very proud of that. Anyways, I did find supports in the community, and I took a program, Voices from the Street, which I now coordinate, and I went through, and it taught me so much, and it opened my eyes, and it taught me about advocacy, and I wanted to give back to the community. But I also wanted to say, because I was poor, I almost lost my children. That's basically the only reason. And so, going through the leadership program helped me to build confidence because I was broken. I was completely broken. I was doing quality assurance and management and training back then. At this time, I could barely answer a phone. I could barely greet someone. I could barely, so I started doing little jobs. The cooling center, you've heard about the cooling center. It's a seasonal job where when there's extreme heat alerts, people man stations and hand out water and things like that. So I was able to do some contract jobs and build up. And so I've been employed full-time for the past 8 years at Working for Change, helping other people through their journey now. So I made many sacrifices. My children went through a lot when they were young, and I made many sacrifices. One of them was to the inner city schools. I didn't feel that they were helping my children. So I decided to, since I was working full-time, to move to Richmond Hill. I researched one of the best schools, moved to Richmond Hill, and through their junior and senior years, they did very well in school. My daughter moved to Ottawa to go to Carleton University and took communications and got her degree. She actually worked as a waitress for about 2 years and then couldn't find anything in her field and wanted to come back to Toronto, but told me it was too expensive. So now she's moved to Calgary, and she should be my best friend now that she's all grown up, but she's in Calgary, so looking to pursue other initiatives. My son did well in school as well. He didn't go to university. He recently found a construction job that he's doing well. And unfortunately, he doesn't live with me because I'm homeless again. So he's staying with his girlfriend's parents, which is okay, as long as I don't become a grandma. I currently am resting my head at a shelter with 47 women in one room. I wake up to people screaming at each other, go to bed to people screaming at each other, and I understand the environment. I work with the community, so I'm very patient and understanding, and I try to be away from the space as much as possible. But I'm working. Why should I be taking up a bed for somebody that somebody else really, really needs? And so I've been displaced since 2015. So while being housed, for going through those struggles, making those sacrifices, talking about my experiences through the years, my speeches were getting better and better and better by my experiences, and then to be in this position again, it's really deflating. So I have had to be creative since 2015. I've had to sublet, which is one of the reasons that's causing rents to go high, but I couldn't do anything much about that. I was fortunate to stay at Seneca Residence. They were renting out in the summer to people in the community, and I was able to stay there for about 2 years. And so those are the ways that I was juggling it around. But unfortunately, for the past 2 weeks, I couldn't find anything. And so when I was housed, when I was asked to do the speech, but I don't know, maybe something happened for this experience. So anyways, I'm finding one of the subletting places that I live, I find companies are taking over, renovating these units, and jacking up the prices when people move out. So I was subletting a place for $850. And when I looked in the building for a much tinier, but one-bedroom, really small unit, it was $1,475 in the same building, which was ridiculous. And I have to say, I think your stat is just a little off. 17, it just went up to 2,000. The average, and within the last 6 months, I can say, it grew from 15 to 2,000. And I've been watching it really closely. So I'm also seeing a trend of students sharing their spaces. But now I'm seeing people, like adults, sharing their spaces with strangers, with families. And it's really hard to share a space with somebody else in a one-bedroom. And that's what I'm seeing. People that I work with in other communities, in other organizations, this is happening to as well. So I wonder, and now I think about my experience in children's aid and how are mothers affording to move out. Shelters are full. Seton House, it has 543 beds. For the last 2 years, they've had to add cots to that. Subsidized housing, the waiting list is 14 years, and people in shelters can't go anywhere. And this has led a dramatic increase in the number of people sleeping rough. I don't know if you're watching around Toronto, there's more people on the streets than I've ever seen before. This has led to a dramatic increase into people on the streets, but this also causes drug and alcohol use. And it leads also to overdose. High rents also leads to increased detention in hospitals and jails. If you have no bed, you have no address. If you have no address, you're not getting any bail. If you're on the streets and you're partaking in substances, you may be getting into fights, you may be getting arrested, and the cycle continues. And we know Housing First works. I was a coordinator. I don't know if you're familiar with the Housing First at Home Shishwa project. And I coordinated the people with lived experience that was advising on that committee. And if we can't, I don't know, I don't know if we can reduce rents. But if we can't, we need to raise the income of our vulnerable community. I had an opportunity to MC the housing rally from last year, and over 500 people attended. We need thousands. We need to make a mark. We have governments in different levels blaming each other. We need people to get together and solve this crisis. It's actually really scary. The Canadian Poverty Reduction Strategy in Canada's it's their chance to make good on their promise. So we need strong federal leadership to help turn tides on poverty. We need to rent here to income housing to stay, but we also have to look into portable rent supplements, and that way areas don't get ghettoized. We need to adopt a gender lens on housing and homelessness. Women that are fleeing abuse get priority housing, but they're housed in violent neighborhoods. And so mental illness is prevalent in that community. We need to develop a targeted youth homeless strategy, especially for the LGBT community, and create accessible housing to people living with disability. And we need to do it now. Thank you.
A partnership relationship with LAMP, which goes back to 1993. We have a housing office located in the LAMP building where I've been working for a considerable period of time. Basically, we work with people on low incomes and we help them in a variety of ways. And what I want to do is talk a bit about that, what are the specific challenges in South Etobicoke Lakeshore for the low-income population in terms of housing issues, and then just say a bit about some general trends that we're seeing in the environment. So basically our clients are on incomes that are really at the lower end of the scale. We do have clients who are working. We use the rent bank service, for example, which is designed for people who aren't eligible for assistance through welfare to help them with their rent. We also have considerable number of people on part-time jobs, but the bulk of our clients are on fixed incomes, like ODSP, social assistance, and also seniors, which is now an emerging group, which I think was brought out very well. Single seniors are among the most challenged group now in terms of housing, because a single senior, just with a basic pension, gets $1,300 a month to live on. So think of what the rents are. What's the average rent for one bedroom? How are they managing that? So that's certainly one of the big areas. So we work with people in a variety of different ways. We work with people in our office. We help them with rent bank. We help them apply for energy assistance programs. But we also home visit clients. So we go out to the community. People who have been placed in housing through our street outreach service are then followed up with to help them stabilize. So there's a big emphasis on stabilizing people so they don't get in a position where they have to look for housing. It's so difficult to look for housing. And we visit people where they don't live. We visit people in the parks in this area, Ray Curtis, this park here, Humber Bay Park. There's many people who are living now in the parks, and our street outreach team, it's a van, and they're working 7 days a week, and certainly this is one of the busiest parts of Etobicoke in terms of that service. So what we see in South Etobicoke is some distinctions, I think, in terms of the sort of demographics. There's a higher proportion of single-person household compared to the rest of Toronto. There's more people in the near senior age group and now starting to move up into the senior age group. The housing stock is a bit different here. There's a large proportion, much greater than in the rest of Toronto, in terms of low-rise housing. So it's about 25% of people live in these buildings that have less than 5 floors. So there's some distinctive things there. So what we're finding in terms of the people who we're working with is that the single people are becoming our largest group in terms of clients. It's over 60%. And these are people with a variety of issues, often not only low income, not only because they're on disability or others, but because they have complex problems they're dealing with. So it could be health issues, it could be mental health issues, and sometimes substance use issues. So these make things much more difficult. It's harder to find housing because you're more likely to be discriminated against. And it's also harder to keep housing because you're dealing with all these things which are going to make it harder. You know, make it harder for you to make all the obligations that you have to do to stay housed. So we're also seeing situations emerge from the housing stock. For example, accessibility is an increasingly important issue in South Etobicoke. Because so much of the housing is low-rise, many of these buildings do not have elevators. That's right. And so what we're finding is population ages and also people getting physical injuries and who are in these buildings are really in a jam. Because they're on low incomes, it's so hard for them to move, but they really can't stay in place anymore. So, and again, also, they're often very attached to their community, because this is one of the things you find with the situation in terms of South Etobicoke. Partly, I think it's because of the structure of the rental housing. People live in small communities, they get to know each other, they feel an attachment, and they want to stay here. And so that's one of the things that has to be contended with in terms of looking for housing. As I mentioned before, because I think partly of the large single population, including people facing serious issues. We're finding more street homelessness or outside people living outside in this part of Etobicoke than the other parts. So we work throughout the whole part of the whole city of Etobicoke, and the overall number is growing in terms of the clients who are outside that we're contacting, but it's growing even more in this area. So it's a major challenge in this area. Another one of the major challenges specific to South Etobicoke is electricity. South Etobicoke, probably more than almost any other area in the city of Toronto, has a situation where landlords have separated the electricity bills from the rent. So it's totally different in Rexdale, the other parts of Etobicoke. So as we all know, the electricity bills have been going up incredibly. So between 2006 and 2015, the average household doubled their electricity bill. It's like 10% a year. So this has been a huge challenge in South Etobicoke. Now fortunately there's a bit of good news in this area because the provincial government has been moving, responding. Obviously it's a political big issue. And they have introduced some programs which we're now helping to implement, which are very valuable. This Ontario Electricity Support Program, probably the most important, which can, for low-income people, can give them a monthly subsidy, basically, on their hydro bill. And they recently increased that just in the last May. So if you know people who are paying their hydro separately, we're helping people to complete those forms. So by all means, let them know, because it's a really useful thing. Another issue, I think, which is distinct to this area is the issue of possible gentrification. Because this issue attracts development, especially of condos, more so than other areas, it's that magnet of the lakefront that draws people here. Now, development's great in principle. I mean, it's been a driver of the economy. It's resulted in billions of dollars investment, hundreds of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of new jobs. But the impact on low-income people can be devastating because, as we know, rents are so high. And if these projects then result in developing areas that are now where the affordable private market housing is located, it can result in serious losses of affordable housing and just a disastrous situation for the people involved. So that's a continuous challenge in this area that really has to have the attention of the community to make sure that process is carried forward in a way that doesn't further victimize people who are in this situation. So those are some of the big challenges we see in terms of specific to Etobicoke. Now, in the sort of broader level, what we're seeing, one of the things that was a very concerning development is that there's something happening at the lower end of the market in terms of rental housing. I guess in terms of understanding this, the housing market is very much a segmented market. People on lower incomes are limited in where they're able to find housing. Now, part of that is rent affordability, but part of it is income status, because when you're trying to rent housing, it's a different kind of market relationship from when you're sort of going out and buying detergent in the store, because the person who's selling you detergent in the store doesn't care what your income source is, and that's not going to affect their decision whether they're going to sell you detergent. But a landlord is going to make a judgment based on your income status. And everybody who's applying for rental housing has to provide the income status.
Bedroom apartment. The average cost of the house is so this is obviously having a very negative. Impact on Canadians, anybody who rents Canadians, and anybody who rents children, anybody who owns a house who has. So that pretty much covers all of Toronto. So we started this organization. We believe in the radical notion that more people to have housing. You need to build more people to have housing. You need to build more housing. So there are three ways. It's crazy. Yeah. So we took this kind of. So we took this on the first perspective. When we looked at the problem and tried to work across solutions. If you want affordability in any market, you could either work to increase demand. You could either work to increase demand. Province in particular in targeting. We see a lot of notions in targeting. We see a lot of notions in targeting. So these are all ways that we reduce demand. Another way to increase supply. So another way to increase supply. So we had that rental more housing up. We had that rental power shift up. Landlords, bargaining power shifts from landlords and tenants, and we start seeing some. The third option, and this is a pretty. The third option, and the third option is pretty off the list. The third option is has recently expanded. The province has recently expanded rent units cover all rental units after 1991. That was the cutoff. After 1991, that was the cutoff. Previous legislation. And for various reasons. And for various reasons, landed on the second. We think that increasing supply. We think that increasing supply. The way forward on this issue. The way forward on this issue. Looking at the world that have tried. We want affordability in Toronto. We want affordability. We want young people to not have. We want young people to not have to do it. Hours every day to get their jobs downtown. Hours every day to get their jobs downtown. I'm going to keep that message short. I'm sure we'll get into a lot. I'm going to keep that message short. I'm sure we'll get into a lot of the details in the Q&A, but.
And not be too academic about this, but I'm going to take a slightly different angle. I'll start out by telling you that I bought a house in 2003 and it's gone up in value 400%. And the actual cost of building that house has gone up about 32%. If I knocked down the house and put up a for sale sign, I would get that same price. What I'm telling you is the issue of affordability in Toronto is a land issue. And that is the City of Toronto has embraced a policy that I call socialism for the rich. And that is, it's a policy of winner take all. They have effectively frozen the density for about 65, 70% of the land. And they've frozen it for large, expensive, single-family homes. The CMHC just did some research, and they claim that Montreal, about 30% of the value of a home is in the land. In Toronto, it's 80 to 90%. And so we can thank the City of Toronto for it Save the Neighborhoods and socialism for the rich. And that is that you can, other than building condo, where you're not going to encounter NIMBYism. I drove along the Gardner, and you're not going to find too many NIMBYs there. But so we're getting high-rise. But the problem is that we have neighborhoods today where the housing is large, it's expensive, and it's empty. In 1970, the average household size in Toronto was about 4.2, and that didn't include the people in the basement apartment. The average consumption was 300 square feet a person. Today it's 700 square feet a person, and the average occupancy is just over 2. So in fact, if you went through the City of Toronto in all of these expensive homes and counted the empty space and the empty bedrooms, it's absolutely incredible. And I hearken back to the time where Barbara Hall was mayor and wringing their hands that they couldn't, that the downtown was dying. And Barbara Hall did something amazing. She took all the zoning off, the west of the city and east of downtown, and it blossomed. In the state of Massachusetts, if 10% of your housing is not affordable, a developer can override all zoning. But zoning has really embraced this idea that we should serve the rich and screw the poor. And when you get land costs up to 80% of the value of a home, affordability is just idle talk. You will never change the formula. We had a policy of the city the other day to take an area and designate it historic. And these were old stores along the area. And they did it in such a way that it would really block all redevelopment. Well, and the problem we have in Toronto is that we have two ends of the spectrum that are very important. We have the millennial population and we have the aging. The fastest growing household group are aging. And if you begin to look at that group, So let's turn again around and say, shouldn't we build housing for the people that need it? So there's three groups. There's people who are economically disadvantaged, there's millennials, and there's no secret, they want what we want. They want a home in an old neighborhood. And then there are the aging. The aging are the biggest challenge we have, but we won't solve any of this if we perpetuate this policy of socialism for the rich and we lock in almost 70% of our land for expensive single-family homes. I'm embarrassed to say that I'm laughing all the way to the bank, thank you to the City of Toronto. Because if anyone comes into my neighborhood to try and redevelop, the only thing they can do is knock down a home and build a mansion. The city will accept that. The city will not allow you in any way to redevelop. So I think that the real challenge is to look at providing a different, is bridging the gap between the high-rise condo. I don't believe we should put elderly people in 80-story buildings. I think we need mid-rise, I think we need creative thinking, and we need to repopulate these neighborhoods with different ethnicity, with different incomes, with different age groups. And we cannot continue to treat the city as though it's an archaeological site.
House prices were axed. Every single home in this riding now is 15 and more likely 20 times more expensive than it was when my family moved here in 1976. The people living in them are not making 15 and 20 times more money. No. And that's a big problem. And that's why I was proud to be part of the team that ran this last election, and that's why a national housing strategy is a big part of my government's commitment and something that we're working on and will be rolling out in detail very shortly. I'm the co-chair of the Toronto caucus, so we have 25 members of Parliament in Toronto, and myself and another MP run that group, and we meet regularly with different organizations, but we meet 3 times a year with meritorium councillors, and every single time we have that meeting we talk about housing affordability in the City of Toronto. It's a priority for them, it's a priority for us. So I'm really glad to be here tonight and sit and be able to listen to you talk about this very, very important issue because it's going to help me when I go back and am able to contribute to what we're doing in Ottawa to try to move this issue forward and make it better. So thank you for having me tonight. I won't take up any more of your time. So I want to hear from you.